Yeah, thank you, Rishi, for that introduction. I will be talking about building products to manage risk in today's presentation. So just a little bit about me. Again, thanks, Rishi, for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here. And I also want to thank Products That Count for giving me this opportunity to talk through today. As Rishi mentioned, my name is Sneha. I'm currently a risk product manager in the Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing business. As Rishi also mentioned, it's a self-publishing business where anyone can go in and publish a book and to be sold on Amazon.com. Previously, I was at KPMG before this as a director in the risk consulting practice. I've pretty much spent all of my career in the risk space. At KPMG, I started out in the technology audit function, where I audited large public companies. Over time, I held several roles where I assessed public and private companies for internal control environments, and I helped build the risk framework for these companies, acting as an internal consultant. I've worked on several different industries from healthcare, manufacturing, tech. And then in the last 3 to 4 years, I've pivoted to more of a product role within Amazon. Within Amazon, I've been in 3 different businesses, the third-party seller business, Amazon Pharmacy, and then most recently, my role in KDP. So within KDP, I'm a risk product manager where I build products to detect and mitigate content risk. So that's a little bit about me. So my agenda here is to provide an overview of how product managers need to think about risk. I generally feel that this is a very underserved space, so I'd like to bring a little bit more awareness into this space. Addressing risk is usually an afterthought, and rightly so. Typically, in the growth stage of your product, you want to take more risk, but then things catch up, and then you need to worry about it later on. What you will learn today is what risk means to your product, what types of risk you can encounter, and some practical ways to address them, and how you manage escalations. If you're in the risk space, you're always responding to some type of an issue or an escalation, which is quite common. So before we jump in, I just want to take a quick poll. If anyone in the audience is either in the risk space or has a product that has a dedicated risk team, can just post in the chat. Okay. So I guess we can start with what is risk and what I mean by risk here. So by risk, I don't mean the risk in building a product. So for example, if you don't talk to your customers or understand the problem statement and you start to build user stories, you run into the risk of building the wrong product. And so that is not quite the risk I'm talking about. But by risk, I mean what could go wrong potentially for something that is already launched or more of a mature product. So these incidents are something that could hurt you or your product or your business. It could give you the wrong publicity and lose trust with your customers. For example, bad actors misusing the product fraudulently to impact your finances, fake information or hate speech propagating through your product, which makes it for a very uncomfortable user experience, driving customers away, or any type of vendor or seller that's working with you and your product and they have a bad experience. Usually in these types of cases, there could be three victims. You as the company, where you've incurred a loss or impacted in your finances due to the fraudulent nature of the scam. Or it could be your customers who wanted to use your service and ended up with a very poor experience, or got scammed while being in your product or your platform. Or it could be your vendors, those who do business with you, such as sellers or folks that are trying to have a transaction in your product or platform who no longer trust your services. So all of these types of risks impede growth, and you need a way to address them and keep it under control. So here is a quick example of kind of what I saw in the last couple of days. So this is one where I saw on LinkedIn where someone had posted and flagged that this product was being sold on on Walmart, where they were selling trucks with the symbol like the Russian Army Z on them. And so this just gained so much popularity, had several reshares, and it was gaining a lot of traction within LinkedIn. Couple hours later, I tried to go find that same product, and I couldn't find it. So obviously, someone has, taken into account that this was gaining a lot of popularity in social media, and then decided to take the product down. So this is a type of risk that usually you would deal with more on the content side, and these are the types of risks that I am referring to when we talk about a little bit more in the mature stage. So broadly, there are four types of risks that your product can encounter. The first one is content risk. It refers to challenges that can arise from the content in your platform that could damage your brand, reputation, or lose trust. The second one is financial or product abuse, where bad actors find loopholes in your product to benefit themselves. This can be anything from credit card abuse to selling fake products. So anything that impacts the P&L incorrectly would be considered product abuse or financial risk. Social or reputational risk refers to either like customers or vendors discussing experiences about their product or brand in social media without you being able to respond. This is just gaining a lot of traction in different places, and you would need a way to understand them and address them. If not, it could damage your product and brand. And the last one, technical risk, is a whole kind of separate discussion topic that has a lot of different things within them, like privacy, security, identity risk. There's a lot of analysis and deep dives within the whole technical risk space, so we will not be covering that in today's session. Our focus will be mainly on the content risk and product abuse and financial risk. So this really brings us into when you need a risk product function. Not all products will need a dedicated risk function, but it's good for PMs to be aware. Typically, mature products tend to have a more dedicated risk department. In the growth stage, you're actively trying to be more risk seeking, which is, of course, the right call. You don't want to be bound by regulations and compliance and thinking what could go wrong in that stage when you're trying to take off. So I would suggest that growth stage PMs just be cautiously aware and not make major product decisions based off of risk. However, when you get into that growth stage to maturity, that's when you will start to see the need for a dedicated risk function. Some of the things that you need to think about when you think about a risk function are: what is the nature of the industry? That really dictates what type of attention you need to pay to risk. So, for example, healthcare, financial spaces tend to have more regulations and compliance that come with these industries. So even an immature product or an early stage product will be thinking about these things as they are trying to take off. Healthcare startups tend to have compliance functions even in the startup space, and the same thing for financial. The second thing you can think about is like, where are your operations? As you expand, and you probably go into different countries. There are different local country laws and regulations, which may warrant the need for a risk function. What might be okay in the States from like a content standpoint may not be the same in Japan or Korea. So as you think about expanding and doing businesses with these countries, you might need someone to walk you through the regulations and risks that are associated with operating in those countries. And then lastly, you can also think about how you let users engage with your platform. Is it more open source where anyone can post content and it's really easy to make a sale or transaction? What type of controls do you have in place for those types of interactions? Again, typically, like in the early stages, you may have made choices that make it really easy for customers and vendors to engage with your product and just make transactions and sales in your product. And so that is, while that's the right call, it may, as you start to grow and as you start to get bigger, that may start to have complexities of its own and risks of its own. So you might need to trace back and see what controls you have in place and how you let folks engage with your product and your platform. So let's dive into the first risk that we will be discussing today, which is content risk. So content risk is any content that can pose a challenge or have a negative consequence to your brand, especially if your platform allows users to post content, which is anything, you are susceptible to content risk. Pretty much any product today has some type of interaction with free-form text or content. And it's not just the big names like YouTube or Meta, but almost anyone has this risk. So if you are a platform where you allow users to post comments or interact with each other like Nextdoor or DoorDash, Grubhub, you are susceptible to content risk. However, if you don't have any type of user-generated content at all, where everything that is posted on your product is controlled, for example, like Headspace, the meditation app Calm, like you probably are less susceptible to these types of risks. So as a PM, you can ask can a user generate any free-form text? And can this be visible to other users and the public? If the answer is yes, then you are susceptible to some type of a content risk, and you may want to consider how to address them. So let's talk about why this is a problem. Unmoderated content results in the following. So fake news or misinformation is being allowed to spread through your product and platform, which needs to be tackled at its source. You may have issues related to incorrect product information or just information that is being allowed to propagate in your platform, which might lead to issues in sales and just a poor customer experience. You want to make sure that customers who come into your website have the best experience and don't encounter anything that they don't want to see or something that violates any of the content policies. You also want to make sure that things you put out there are relevant for the different countries that you are operating in. Again, they cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution. So you want to be aware of those types of regulations as well, and you don't want to, be violating policies from a different country. Again, as you like any platform that lets two users interact with each other, it's very easy for hateful or harmful content to easily escalate, and you do need a process to keep that under check. So this is content risk and content moderation is quite prevalent. Most folks should know this from like some of the bigger companies like Meta, YouTube, and Amazon. It's quite common to see this in the news. Usually, they take down offensive content or fake content after the fact, or they also have products in place where they could detect that something is violating the content, and even before you post it, they may let you know that this is not something that we can allow on our websites, and either change it or we will not let you post it. So this is the impact and this is the risk related to free-form content or just content risk in itself. So how do you solve for this? Now that we've established that unmoderated content poses a risk, we need to look into how to address it. As mentioned earlier, like any type of product that has free-form content interaction with users is susceptible, especially if it's publicly viewable. You might want to have controls in place to make sure that those are being addressed. So the first step to think about addressing content risk is really consult with legal or compliance on any policies that you already have in place. Based on that, you can build a framework that allows you to confidently remove the content that is violating these policies based on guidance from legal or compliance. And then in building these frameworks, definitely consider the countries that you operate in, any type of world events like COVID, elections, for example. These actually have an impact on the type of things that folks end up posting on your platform. So those are things that you can consider as you come up with this framework. From a product standpoint, there are two broad ways to address and solve this problem. Ideally preventative, so even before the content is published, you can let the user know that what you're trying to post may not meet the standard. Either you make a change or we may not be able to let you proceed. Another way is detective. This is where you kind of scout or scan your website and take down content that may potentially be violating some type of a policy or does not meet any specifications. The only thing, the detective measures are equally good. The only thing is that you need to make sure that you get ahead of it before your customers let you know or it becomes a news information. And then depending on how much of a problem or how much of a risk this is for you, you could either consider building these types of frameworks in-house or you could outsource them. If you are building something in-house, which is more of a content risk moderation framework, some of the tools that you can use are, customized machine learning models that predict whether the content is meeting your policies or not. There's automation, rules-based, checks and keywords that you can use to remove the content that you don't think is appropriate or is not meeting the standards that you've set for yourself. And then you can also use human inputs, have a group of human reviewers who would be deciding if the content meets the guidelines or not, especially for things that cannot be always addressed with high precision using machine learning or automation. In some cases, you can use all three to get the best of the best prediction of all of these available technologies. Obviously, use of machine learning is the most effective. However, those do take time to develop and maintain. So you can see what is best for your situation. Not everyone needs to build these types of frameworks in-house. If this is a risk, but not that big of a risk, you can outsource this whole process. There are several services out there that help you moderate content, services that would just let you plug in via an API and charge per content reviewed. You don't need to build these types of frameworks in-house. It's definitely more for much bigger companies and where the content risk is quite high. It's just when you outsource it, just think about, just in any inadvertent bias that you might be introducing, like is the definition of hate same across all different use cases? Are there any language or country specific considerations that you might want to think about? So those are the ways that you can practically address content risk that might be something that you need to consider as a product manager. The next one we'll focus on is financial risk or product abuse. This is considered as any money that is being made or spent that hurts the P&L fraudulently. Which means that this was not meant to be, but then someone has been able to, scam your product or your platform, and was able to impact either a sale or any type of customer interaction that impacts the P&L. So any examples are like these get-rich-quick schemes, spending of money that is artificially jacked up, like loopholes in the system architecture that you were not aware of, but someone has figured out and is able to quickly, take advantage of that. These could also be consequences of decisions that you made in the early stages of your product, which may now pose a problem for you. So, for example, you may have made it really easy to, set up an account or create a link to a customer's banking statements, but later on you don't have enough evidences or that's needed to actually set that up, and that's just become a bigger problem of its own, and now you need to tackle it in the back end. So those are considered financial risk or product abuse. So some examples here are like the Facebook marketplace scams. I think people might know about this quite often. Like this is quite prevalent, and there's a lot of guidance out there on how to not be scammed on Facebook Marketplace. Some other things I've seen are like return or refund abuse. This could usually happen with tech products like books or like audio content, where people are buying them, using them, and then returning them. Or folks can artificially increase the popularity of a product with likes, comments, which are mainly deceiving a customer. So these are essentially processes that have loopholes in your product, which folks have figured out and are trying to make use of them. Solutions to address these are very similar to how you might address content risk at a really high level. The idea is to identify these patterns of abnormality and then recognize this pattern and try to address them. So once you've recognized them, you can continue to use machine learning models that predict the abnormality with high confidence, automation-based rules that can help to detect these patterns and make you aware of how big the problem is. You can also trace back to the source of the process and potentially add friction into this process so that you can avoid downstream impact. So, for example, if it's something in the account creation, or you could add additional friction into that process to make sure that you have what is needed, so that there isn't a fraudulent activity that's happening later on. Just be cautious of any of these changes that you're making. You don't want to make it harder for genuine customers and genuine people that are trying to engage with your product in an effort to make it harder for fraudsters. So those were the two main risks that I wanted to talk about that I see quite often, especially in the product space. If you are in the world of risk, you are in situations where you need to manage a crisis or escalations. And I wanted to share like a brief framework around how you would do that. So the first step really is to acknowledge the issue and keep calm. So really take control of the situation. The next is to understand, where is the issue coming from? Is it news, social media, like a customer has reached out and it's blowing up on Twitter, or a customer is engaging directly with C-suite? Where is the information or where is the issue coming from? And identify the blast radius. Consider if this is already a known issue. Perhaps it's something that you're already aware of, which is a good thing. But if not, you really want to assess the size of the incident. For example, is it one like really bad incident, or several, just poor incidents of bad customer service? So, for example, the risk of one really bad hate speech or like social security numbers exposed may be a much bigger impact than 15 incidences of poor customer service where something was shipped late or something was just bad. So you really want to think about what is that impact and then address it based off of that. As a first check, just definitely make sure if you can see if the issue can be solved right away. And if you can do so, just put an end to the issue if you can via your customer service. If not, you could do a complete root cause analysis and prioritize against other initiatives and see where the root cause of this issue can fall and where it would land up in your roadmap. And then finally, communicate, share with your stakeholders around what you've done to, one, assess the root cause and what you're going to do to address this problem. Just one thing to note is like not all escalations can be solved for. You definitely need to make an assessment based on the incident and the risk and have a framework to respond to the issue. So in closing, the risk space is a unique space where if nothing happens, then you're doing a great job. Inadvertent consequences of like early product decisions end up taking a life of its own, causing more complexities later on. And so as your product matures and becomes bigger, that's when you'll start to see the impact of some early decisions that you've made and how you would need to react to them. So risk PMs usually get looped in only when there's a crisis. So definitely be sure to thank them when things are not on fire. Yeah, thank you. And I'll be open for questions now.
Some great presentation. There are a lot of questions that we've received, so I'll jump right in. I think the first one was around like detecting various risks within your product and measuring them. So what are some of the KPIs that are commonly used to measure these risks, and how do you tell whether they're like the risk is improving or decreasing?
Yeah, so that is a good question. So I think it really depends on which type of risk you are referring to. So if it's kind of like on the fraud side, it might be, how you detect fraudulent accounts, how many have you detected and how many have you kind of taken down or how many have you addressed and how is that impacting any of your P&L. So that could be a certain metric that you would use. So like working back from what are those accounts and how do they get generated? How do you define that they are fraudulent? What is the measures you're taking to bring those down eventually? Same thing can be, for content type of risks as well. How many issues are you seeing over time, over weeks? How many of these are escalations, and how many are you responding to? And what is the specific mechanism you are seeing to see those same root cause and same escalations come down over time?
Thank you. And then the next question is on how do you detect low prevalence but high severity issues like the New York Times articles? Oftentimes these spring up as a surprise, and how can you be more proactive in detecting them or knowing that something will go wrong?
Yeah. So again, it's in some cases in some cases it does happen, and so you just need to be prepared and aware of that and have that like framework in place to detect and react to it when it does happen. But in other cases, it's really understanding like what is your business and where are what are the types of risks you're seeing. So depending on what type of platform you have, or what type of product space you are in. I think the 3 or 4 risks that we talked about, like content, financial, really like in some cases, one might be more prevalent than another. So really thinking through which is more important for you and which is more relevant for you in your space, and then diving into like what could go wrongs in each of that. So thinking through, okay, if it's a content risk and you have a space where there is a lot of content that is being posted out there. So thinking about what could go wrong, what are the controls that you have in place, and trying to prevent them as much as you can, so that you don't allow the New York Times article to come through. But in other cases, if it does, then you have that framework of how to respond to it as well.
Makes sense. The next question is around what are the key differences in the risk types that you see for B2B products versus like B2C products?
Yeah, so in B2B, obviously B2C has definitely more risks, because it is more open source and you have more users that are interacting with your platform, and whatnot. In B2B, it's definitely a little bit more controlled, as you are dealing with other businesses, and so the blast radius could be a little bit more controlled in that way. I think, like financial, technical risks are definitely in play for B2B businesses as well. How do these services interact with each other, and how are things getting paid out? All of those are important considerations from a financial standpoint. On the technical side, there's a whole slew of things related to identity, privacy, security. So all of those definitely get, I think, a higher priority or more relevant, I guess, in the B2B business. So I think those are some of the changes, or the differences that you can see. But like more on the content side, that would be more on the B2C business, because that's where you have really an open source of anyone who can engage with content on your platform.
Awesome. The next question that I have here is around like new technology, and new technology is creating significant risks, such as content generated through generative AI, so on and so forth. So how does one think about risk when it comes to like newer technologies and use cases that they enable that weren't basically possible in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely one that everyone is looking into right now. I think with like generative AI, I think the thing is, what is the stance and what is the policy that you have as a platform? It's not necessarily like, do you is it okay to have generative AI content in your platform? Some cases it might be fine, and some cases it may not. So it's really thinking about like what is that stance that you as a company or a policy framework have, and then based off of that, like putting your frameworks around it, I think would be the best way to move forward. So, for example, AI assisted content is being used now everywhere. So what does that mean for your platform? Is it okay for it to be there or not? So I think that is the first question that you need to understand with either your legal or compliance departments.
Awesome. And then the last one is around like stakeholder management and also getting buy-in on like any risk strategies that you develop.
Mhm.
What would you say in your experience has worked well for you in terms of convincing both like leadership as well as like peers in terms of like why they should like why they should proactively manage risk versus like shooting for more improved product metrics essentially? Because oftentimes there may be a trade-off between these two in terms of like enabling or disabling use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really having that honest conversation about what is the risk and what could go wrong. What is the impact of not doing this? And I think, just thinking about it from like even a news standpoint, I think would be helpful. So if we don't do this, these are the consequences, and this is what could happen to us. Like just laying that down and being comfortable with that risk is the conversation that you would have in terms of like if this is what you want to pursue or a whole different initiative that might be better for the business. So it's really just identifying again like what is the impact of not doing it? What could potentially go wrong? And are you willing as a business to accept that risk? And then using that framework and then working with your stakeholders and leadership, I think would be a good mechanism to address that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time and walking us through the entire risk framework and how you basically balance product, like good product development with managing risk at the same time. I think this was really insightful for the community, and thank you for taking the time to also answer additional questions that folks had. With that, I'll hand it off to Emily.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. I was just saying thank you to everybody who tuned in, and thank you, of course, to Sneha for the wonderful presentation and for Rishi for hosting us. We'll see you next time.